Jim Jones, the hip-hop legend and longtime member of Dipset, has found himself in the middle of a huge FBI investigation that is shaking the hip-hop world. Leaked court documents, wiretapped phone calls, and secret deals revealed on tape have all led to one shocking discovery. Jim Jones has been under surveillance for a long time. Now the truth is coming to light, but what exactly did the authorities uncover? How did Jim Jones end up in this legal mess, and could this be the end of his career? Stay tuned as we break down all the details. Let us break down all the details, the shocking evidence, and the real reason Jim Jones is now in serious legal trouble. Trust me, you do not want to miss what is coming next. Jim Jones has been in the hip-hop world for many years, known for his role in the legendary group The Diplomats, or Dipset, and his massive hit We Fly High. While his music career has seen both highs and lows, his connections to the streets have always raised concerns. For many years, there have been rumors and whispers about Jim's ties to organized crime, gang activity, and questionable dealings. Jim Jones's business dealings have always raised eyebrows, but now the FBI's latest sting operation has turned those rumors into something much bigger. According to leaked reports, Jim Jones has been under surveillance for months, possibly even years, and what the authorities discovered is enough to bring serious legal trouble his way. In today's video, we will dive deep into the FBI sting operation and how Jim Jones got caught up in it. We will explore the secret phone recordings that exposed his alleged involvement and what this means for his career, freedom, and future. But before we break it all down, let me ask you, do you think Jim Jones is guilty, or is this just another case of the authorities targeting a high-profile rapper? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let us dive into the details. And remember, stay until the end because we are going to reveal the most shocking detail about this case that the media has not told you yet. To understand how Jim Jones ended up in this legal mess, we have to go back to the start of the FBI's investigation. Law enforcement does not just wake up one day and decide to put a rapper under surveillance. These investigations take time, planning, and serious evidence. Operations like this take months, sometimes even years, of planning, collecting evidence, and following leads before authorities make a move. Sources close to the case say that federal agents had been keeping an eye on certain high-profile figures in the hip-hop industry for a while. The focus was on their alleged ties to criminal organizations, money laundering, and illegal business dealings. Jim Jones's name kept coming up, but the real turning point in this investigation reportedly started with an informant, someone on the inside who had connections to both the streets and the music industry. The informant started giving law enforcement valuable information. This informant reportedly shared crucial details with the FBI about meetings, transactions, and even direct conversations involving Jim Jones. So, what did the authorities do? They did what they do best. They started listening. According to leaked reports, federal agents managed to get a wiretap on certain individuals connected to the case. These recorded phone calls and messages revealed much more than anyone expected. Just when Jim Jones thought his conversations were private and safe, law enforcement was listening to every single word, even when Jim Jones thought he was off the radar. But what exactly did they capture in those recordings, and how did it seal Jim Jones's fate? Stay with me because what we are about to discuss next will shock you. If there is one thing we have learned over the years, it is that when the authorities start listening, people often go down. In Jim Jones's case, the FBI's wiretap reportedly uncovered conversations that raised serious red flags. Now, let us be clear, the government does not tap phones for no reason. They need to provide enough probable cause to justify it. To convince a judge that someone is involved in criminal activity, authorities need to provide strong evidence. When the warrant gets approved, every call, every text, and every voice memo can and will be used against you. So, what exactly did Jim Jones say that caught the FBI's attention? This isn't the first time Jim Jones's name has been linked to wiretapped conversations. Let us not forget that back in 2019, his name came up in a leaked call with Tekashi, 6ix9ine's former associates. In that conversation, they were discussing violence and street retaliation. This connection raised eyebrows even then, and now it seems the feds were paying even closer attention. That conversation alone raised a lot of concerns, but at the time, Jim Jones managed to avoid serious charges. However, fast forward to today, and it seems like his name has surfaced once again in another major investigation. According to sources, the FBI wiretap in this case allegedly captured private discussions involving Jim Jones and individuals with known criminal ties. These conversations reportedly included talks about financial transactions and coded language that investigators believe referred to illegal activities, involved in illegal activity and even giving orders. Now, here is where things get really messy. Some reports claim that Jim Jones was not just an innocent bystander. He was allegedly giving orders. Law enforcement officials believe that the recorded conversations show Jim Jones discussing strategies, transactions, and even possible ways to avoid detection by the authorities. If these reports are accurate, that means the FBI may have evidence suggesting that Jim Jones was directly involved in criminal activities. Involved in coordinating certain activities, Jim Jones's role raises questions. But here's the thing: coded language is tricky. Just because someone says something vague on a call does not necessarily mean it is illegal. However, if the government can prove that the words used were referring to specific crimes, that is where the real trouble begins. The big question is, will these recordings hold up in court? We have seen cases in the past where wiretapped conversations were thrown out due to a lack of context. Defense attorneys often argue that just because someone says something, it does not always prove criminal activity. Just because someone says something does not necessarily mean they actually committed a crime. But the authorities do not like to lose. If they have taken this step against Jim Jones, it means they likely believe they have enough strong evidence to build a solid case. And this is not just about one or two phone calls. There are rumors that the FBI has months, if not years, of recorded conversations. So, what is next for Jim Jones? And could this be the beginning of the end for his career? Stay tuned, because the next revelation is even more shocking. If there is one thing you should know about the federal authorities, it is that they rarely take these actions without being sure they have a strong case. If there is one thing you should know about the government, it is that they never make a move unless they believe they have enough to win. The authorities have a 90% conviction rate, and that is because they do not bring charges unless their case is airtight. So, how did they build this case against Jim Jones? It did not happen overnight. Step 1 was following the money. One of the biggest red flags for federal investigators is unexplained wealth. We have seen this time and time again, whether it is with rappers, politicians, or businessmen. When the money does not add up, the authorities start watching. Jim Jones has always had strong connections to the streets, and when the money raised questions, the feds began paying closer attention. Jim Jones has been in the rap game for decades, but in recent years, fans have noticed that his music has not been charting the way it used to. Yet despite this, he has been seen living a lavish lifestyle, buying luxury cars, expensive jewelry, and maintaining a lifestyle that raises questions. So the big question is, where is all this money coming from? Federal agents reportedly began tracking financial transactions linked to Jim Jones and his associates. These were not just regular bank transfers. These were large sums of cash moving through accounts, sparking the interest of investigators. Multiple accounts, offshore entities, and even shell companies, according to leaked reports, authorities suspect that some of these transactions were meant to hide the true source of the money. And when the feds start looking into money laundering, things can go downhill fast. Step 2. The power of the informant. If there is one thing the authorities love, it is flipping people. In this case, someone close to Jim Jones may have been working with the authorities. Now think about it. When the FBI launches a sting operation, it is usually because they have inside information from someone who knows the situation well. This person can provide crucial details that help law enforcement build a stronger case. The authorities do not just rely on surveillance and wiretaps. They often depend on inside sources, people who are either looking for a way out of their own legal troubles or want to take down bigger names. So the big question is, who snitched? We have seen this happen in the past. Tekashi 6ix9ine flipped on his entire crew, leading to multiple arrests. Similarly, in other high-profile cases, insiders have turned state witnesses to reduce their own sentences. Some rumors suggest that a former associate of Jim Jones, someone deeply connected to the streets, might have been feeding information to the authorities for a long time. If this is true, it could explain how law enforcement was able to build such a strong case. But here's the real issue. Once the authorities get an informant inside, they do not stop. They begin connecting the dots, gathering more evidence, and eventually they move in for the arrest. Now, this brings us to the next major bombshell. What is Jim Jones actually being charged with? While we do not have the official indictment details yet, the rumors are circulating. Sources suggest that Jim Jones could be facing some serious federal charges. Here is what he might be looking at: conspiracy to commit racketeering. If prosecutors can prove that Jim Jones was part of an ongoing criminal enterprise, he could face a RICO charge. This charge carries a massive prison sentence. Money laundering. If those suspicious financial transactions are linked to illegal activities, Jim Jones could face a federal money laundering case, aiding and abetting criminal activity. Even if Jim Jones was not directly committing crimes, if authorities can prove that he helped facilitate illegal actions, he could still be held accountable. Obstruction of justice. If Jim Jones tried to cover his tracks or warn people about an investigation, that could lead to even more charges. And here is the scariest part. If the authorities go after Jim Jones under RICO laws, they do not need to prove that he personally committed crimes. All they need to show is that he was connected to an organization that did, and that alone could be enough to bring serious charges against him. What happens next? Right now, Jim Jones's legal team is scrambling to figure out their next move. Will he fight these charges in court, or will he take a plea deal to avoid a longer sentence? One thing is clear. This is not just another celebrity scandal. This case could be the biggest legal battle of Jim Jones's life. But the big question remains. Is Jim Jones really guilty, or is he being targeted by the system? And here is where things take an even darker turn, because what we are about to discuss next might change everything. As we dive deeper into this case, one question keeps coming up. Is Jim Jones truly guilty, or is he just another high-profile figure caught in the federal government's crosshairs? If we look at history, the hip-hop industry has always been under intense scrutiny by law enforcement. Many rappers have been investigated, arrested, and even convicted, not just for crimes they committed, but for the people they associated with. So, could it be that Jim Jones is being targeted because of who he knows, rather than what he actually done? The federal government's history with rappers shows a pattern that cannot be ignored. We have seen this story play out before. Tupac Shakur was constantly harassed by law enforcement, and even though he had legal troubles, many believed the police were actively trying to take him down. Snoop Dogg once faced murder charges at the height of his career, despite having little to no direct connection to the crime. Meek Mill was caught in a never-ending legal battle that kept him in and out of courtrooms for years, with many believing he was being unfairly targeted by the system. YFN Lucci, Young Thug, and Gunna, these are all rappers who have recently been caught up in RICO cases, proving that the government is cracking down on the rap industry harder than ever. Now we have Jim Jones, a rapper with decades in the game, suddenly caught up in a massive federal investigation. But why now? One theory floating around is that Jim Jones's legal troubles might be about more than just criminal activity. Some believe that there are powerful forces in the music industry that do not want him to succeed, or that his legal problems are tied to a bigger shift in the industry. Who is really in control? Certain artists or figures are known to have influence, and we've seen hip-hop become more than just music. It is now a multi-billion-dollar industry that influences politics, social justice movements, and even business deals. Some people argue that whenever a black artist gains too much power, the system finds a way to bring them down. Jim Jones is not just a rapper, he is a businessman, an executive, and a respected figure in the culture. Could it be that his arrest is part of a bigger agenda? Or is this truly a case where the evidence is overwhelming and the federal government has no choice but to take action? Simply put, Jim Jones cannot ignore this. It is the streets versus the law. Can Jim Jones beat the system? If Jim Jones plans to fight these charges, he will need one of the best legal teams money can buy. Federal cases are notoriously difficult to win. The conviction rate in federal court is over 90%. When the feds go after someone, they usually have years of evidence stacked against them. So, what are Jim Jones's options? Fighting the charges in court. If Jim Jones truly believes he is innocent, His best option is to go to trial and challenge the evidence. This would mean cross-examining the government's witnesses, which could include informants or former associates. He could also challenge the legality of the wiretaps. Were they obtained legally? Was there enough probable cause? He could argue that his conversations were taken out of context, because just because someone talks about something does not mean they actually committed a crime. However, the risk is high. If he loses at trial, he could be facing decades in prison. Taking a plea deal. Most federal cases never make it to trial. If Jim Jones chooses to take a plea deal, he could get a reduced sentence, but it would mean admitting guilt. Instead of going to trial, most defendants take plea deals to avoid harsher sentences. If the government offers Jim Jones a deal, he could accept a lower sentence in exchange for pleading guilty. He might also agree to cooperate with authorities to reduce his time, possibly even avoiding a long-term sentence by negotiating a lesser charge. But taking a plea deal comes with consequences. It would mean admitting guilt, and this could permanently damage his career and reputation. The culture's response is another important question. How will the hip-hop community stand behind Jim Jones? Will they support him, or will they distance themselves from the situation? This could have a huge impact on his legacy, as hip-hop fans are very loyal and pay attention to how their favorite artists handle tough times. Been in the game for decades, and his arrest has sparked a lot of mixed reactions. Some see him as a figure who has always stood firm in the industry, representing the streets and the culture. These supporters believe that Jim Jones might be another victim of the system trying to take down successful Black artists. They feel that the charges against him could be a way to break his influence and legacy in the game. On the other hand, there are people who are waiting to see how this plays out. If the evidence against him is strong, some in the culture might feel that he should be held accountable for his actions, just like anyone else. After all, the connection between rap lyrics and real-life actions has been a topic of discussion, and Jim Jones's ties to street culture are well known. So, the big question is, will hip-hop rally behind Jim Jones as a symbol of resistance, or will the community turn its back if the case turns out to be true? Time will tell how this case will reshape his place in the culture, but one thing is clear. Whatever happens, it will spark strong reactions across the board, in court. However, if the evidence is too strong, he might have to consider a plea deal. A plea deal could help him avoid a long sentence, but it would come with its own risks, including admitting guilt, which could hurt his career and reputation in the long run. The biggest question now is how the hip-hop community will respond. Will they stand by him, or will they distance themselves from him to avoid being associated with the case? This case could change how people view Jim Jones, both in the streets and in the industry. One thing is certain. Jim Jones's next steps will determine his future. In the end, this will not only be a battle for his freedom, but also for his place in hip-hop history. The FBI likely had before they decided to tap Jim Jones's phone. The question on everyone's mind is whether the recordings truly show illegal actions, or if they were just casual conversations taken out of context. If the feds have strong proof that these conversations were connected to criminal activities, it could be a game changer for Jim Jones. But if his legal team can challenge the wiretap and show that there was not enough evidence to justify it, they may have a chance at winning. As this case unfolds, more questions will arise. Will Jim Jones be able to keep his name clear, or will the evidence prove to be too much to overcome? The next steps in this legal battle could change everything for him and the hip-hop community, the industry, the fans, and even the people who have worked with Jim Jones will be watching closely, and the answer to whether he can beat these charges is still up in the air. What happens next is crucial to understanding not only Jim Jones's fate, but also the broader issues surrounding power, influence, and the law in hip-hop culture. Stay tuned, because this case is far from finished. The FBI decided to wiretap Jim Jones's phone. It means they must have had strong reasons to believe that illegal activity was happening. To get a wiretap approved, they need to show enough evidence to convince a judge that it is necessary for the investigation. This is not something that happens easily. There is a legal process that takes place before a judge gives the go-ahead. Once approved, federal agents can monitor calls and listen to conversations. They must keep track of everything that could be important, and this could include things like discussing illegal transactions, organizing criminal activities, or anything that ties someone to unlawful actions. So, what could Jim Jones have said on these tapes that led to his arrest? This is what investigators would be looking for: conversations that clearly point to criminal behavior. If they find enough incriminating evidence, it could be enough to build a case against him. But the big question is, did he say something that directly ties him to crimes, or are these just misinterpreted conversations? That is what the legal teams will fight over in court. Not mean they are planning a crime. In hip-hop culture, phrases like handling a situation could be referring to anything from business deals to personal issues, not necessarily something illegal. The challenge for the defense will be to argue that Jim Jones's words were just street talk and that there is no clear evidence that he was planning or involved in any criminal activity. However, the FBI will try to show that these conversations were not just vague talk. They will try to prove that the coded language used pointed to something illegal. They will need to connect the dots between the conversations, the people involved, and any criminal activities. This is where the case gets tricky. Just because someone talks about something, it does not mean they actually took part in illegal actions. The defense will argue that the tapes should be taken in the right context, but the feds will argue that the words on the tapes are too clear to ignore. This is the battle that will unfold in court. Build a bigger case against Jim Jones. The feds may have used the information they gathered from the Tekashi 6x99 situation